Hi, my name is Mariana Tremaine. I'm a college student currently attending the University of Maine at Augusta. Unfortunately, I do not live in Maine. I live in Tennessee, so my oral report will be given via YouTube. During the 2016 spring semester, I've been taking Philosophy 250 with help of my professor, Christos Giannopoulos. About halfway through the semester, he asked my classmates and I to write a report on the ethical and moral ideas of a film, novel, or play of our choice. Although I was given a comprehensive list of films more closely pertaining to the coursework, I chose to do my report on a Netflix movie called Circle, written and directed by Aaron Hahn and Mario Michon. Ethics is the study of how we interact in a society. It's important to see that people judge you based on certain stereotypes, and I think that this movie does a really good job at highlighting those stereotypes and putting them out in the open for the viewer to be knowledgeable of. So the premise of the movie Circle starts with 50 people abducted by aliens. They're on an alien spaceship. They're arranged in a circle, thus the movie title. They find out that if they try to leave this circle, that they die. They also find out that if during certain times that people will die anyway. So after like a minute, somebody will die. So based on that information, they decide that it would be morally right to choose the way that the people die instead of letting it happen at random. I want to make a note here that at no point in time was there an external source of input telling them that that was what was going to happen and that was what was morally right, so I just want to make note of that. I'm going to be going over 3 points during the film. I'm going to be going over the ethics of who lives or dies, the ethics of the stereotyping that happens during the film, and the ethics of people refusing to vote during the film, because that does happen as well. Alright, so the first point that I want to make is the ethics of them deciding who lives or dies. The question in this film especially is, should we vote or should we not vote? And the people in this movie decide that they should vote and that it is morally right to vote. Well, at least some of them do. The common theme in this film is the battle between self-preservation and the preservation of goodwill. There's a college kid during the film that suggests that in order to preserve the rest of the people in the group, they should begin killing off the older generation first. And he offers this because of a syllogism: the man is old. Old die first. Therefore, the old should die first. And that's how he draws his conclusion. They start to be, throughout the film, they start to encounter certain situational problems as well. Problems that wouldn't necessarily be problems if it wasn't for the current state of events that they had gotten themselves into. One of these things is the language spoken. There's a Spanish-speaking man there, and no one can understand him, so that's a problem. Time taken. Like I said, certain people get voted off randomly after a certain amount of time. So if you're taking too long speaking, no one's going to want to, hear you talking. They're going to be really upset that you wasted their time. Another one to think about, the situational problem, is the health of the person. In the film, there's a lady who has cancer, and the college boy I mentioned earlier, who was trying to kill off the older generation to preserve the younger people first, he actually targeted her and asked her what her health status was, and she was a cancer patient recovering, and she told him that she was in remission, and he said, well, it could come back, so we should just kill you anyway. And that's an example of one of the situational problems in the film. Another one is worthiness. Like the college kid offering up the old people, he was saying that the younger people are more worthy of living. For example, the older cancer patient is not worthy of the gift of life if she's just going to die. That's what he was trying to argue in the film. During the film, they also wonder if maybe they find the most wicked person, that the pain and, you know, the death and the dying would end, and they would all be able to go home. So they begin to stereotype each other, trying to find out who the most wicked is. And I think that's really actually it parallels to the way people are in society, because, you know, you've been in a situation where somebody was pretending that they were better than you, and this is the same situation. It's just people with their own personal preferences trying to elongate their way in the world, and unfortunately they didn't go about it the best way. The second point, number 2, the one I'm going to be talking about in this speech, is the ethics of this stereotyping throughout the film. As I mentioned earlier, there was a Spanish man who could only speak Spanish, so although he wasn't an English speaker, they were stereotyping him as being a Spanish speaker. And one of the lawyers in the film actually says, well, he's a Mexican and he's probably just taking American jobs anyway, so why should we keep him alive? The example of stereotypes throughout the film. There was actually another situation where a black guy said that the process had become too racist, that there were too few black people versus white people in the circle, and he claimed that the white people were being racist, and that had to stop, which wasn't really a factor in the film. There was a lesbian woman as well who was targeted by a lawyer figure for being gay. He had asked her about her life, and she had talked about working for nonprofit organizations and raising an orphan and being married to a wonderful spouse, and all he seemed to care about was the fact that she was gay, so she should die. And of course that's not fair. Randomly throughout the film, there's a woman with a hijab. If you don't know what a hijab is, that's the headpiece that Muslim women wear. And anyways, she just died randomly for no reason. She actually wasn't even talking to anybody. And so that's another stereotype that was used in the film. There's also a woman who doesn't say anything during the film, and she's killed off in a tie vote just because they decided to kill her. So I want to take this time to also mention the people who died at the beginning. When they were figuring out how they could vote, they were killing people off to figure out that they could vote. So I want to make a mention of the ethics of those people dying as well. The people who die at the end of the movie, they don't die in the best way. There's actually a 4-way tie vote. And it happens because there's this man who doesn't want to vote, and I'll get into that later. My third point, I'm going to be talking about the ethics of refusing to vote. There's a couple people who refuse to vote. One person does not vote at all, like I mentioned earlier, and a couple other people decide that they want to commit suicide instead of voting, because that is more morally right and just to them than killing people off to perhaps save themselves or even to save anybody else. The people who choose to commit suicide are doing a morally, what term am I trying to use here? They're committing, okay, I'm just going to leave that point the way it is. Basically, the people who choose to commit suicide are under scrutiny, because when you think of suicide, a lot of Christian people and other religions believe that suicide is a sin. You can't take your life from yourself. While different societies like Greek and Roman mythology actually commended their heroes for committing suicide as long as they were preserving goodwill in some way. The philosopher Immanuel Kant would say that suicide is not a good option no matter what, even if you choose to preserve goodwill. And the reason he says this is because human beings are so much more than animals are. And to have our intelligence and the gift of our human life, we can't simply just forsake that, because to him that would be like an animal to forsake that gift. And that's what Immanuel Kant would say about it. Looking at my cue cards. Sorry, give me 1 second. Um, Alright, there was actually a point in the movie where they asked, well, actually, towards the end of the movie, they found out that that one guy had never voted, and when he didn't vote, he caused a four-way tie, and everyone who was trying to vote died, unfortunately, because he didn't vote. And after that had happened, they were questioning if he had any guilt about the situation, and I think that maybe the viewers were questioning his guilt as well. And I think that he did not have any guilt from the situation, and that's one of the things that one of the main characters pointed out towards the end, is that he didn't vote. Everything that happened because of somebody else. And if you want to talk about the people who are going to be truly innocent when this is all said and done, one of the only people that can admit that they are innocent is the man who didn't vote. Really, and the people who committed suicide, depending on what your opinion of the morality of that is. He actually, the man who didn't vote, was the only person who could say that he did not have a hand in the evil things that happened here. And I think that is admirable, even though one of the characters had chastised him for it. So I'm going to get into my conclusion, because it's been talking long enough. Basically, I want to go over the fact that the theme of the movie was either self-preservation or the preservation of goodwill. There was two different groups of people. One group of people wanted to kill off the other group, who wanted to preserve the life of an 8-year-old girl and a pregnant woman. There was a group of people who wanted to keep them alive. And then there was also a group of people who wanted to kill them off to preserve their chances of possibly getting out alive. And those people pitted themselves against each other to lead towards the conclusion of the film. Okay, basically, so towards the end of the film, like I said, the man who had never voted was one of the last 4 people left. He gets asked if they want him to die, and he kind of gives him a blank stare. Again, he's not saying anything, he's not talking to anyone, he's not voting, and he basically gives him a look like, yeah, you know, I know you don't have a choice, you might as well get it over with. And so they kill him. Then what basically ends up happening is that there's this guy who's talking to the 8-year-old girl, Katie, and the pregnant woman, and he's basically telling them what will happen when he's gone. He says that one will have to sacrifice themselves so the other one will live. Katie, the little 8-year-old girl, says that she wants to sacrifice herself because that would save the baby's life. And so she is convinced at that point that she wants to die. So she makes an effort to sacrifice her life. The third character, the man, basically sees that she is about to make that choice and watches her jump, and at the last second he votes for the pregnant lady and he kills them both. So the whole premise of the movie, which was let me try to get out alive, or let me try to preserve the lives of these two innocent, pure people, even though the guy happened to be on the team to preserve the innocence of the other two people, he chose to preserve himself. And I think towards the end of the movie, the self-preservation aspect, for him at least, overcame the preservation of goodwill. Basically, when he chose to, he convinced Katie to kill herself, and while Katie was killing herself, he killed the pregnant woman. And at that moment, his ethical morality was forsaken. And that's because there was nobody else in that room watching him commit those acts. His self-preservation need was so strong that he was okay with forsaking an ethical, moral society. Basically, at the conclusion of this film, I just wanted to say that I think it has a really good grasp of society and the way people adapt to situations subjective to the reality currently presented. And that's what I have to say about the movie Circle.